Fantastic to see this many people come out to a meeting such as this. I know I was here about an hour before it started, and I thought, I hope people come. We've advertised. Many people that have never heard of CARP, like myself about a month ago, would say, what is it? What is it about? And I thank you so much for laying some groundwork for an exciting future for folks that are moving into a very specialized time in their life. You might be looking at me saying, why is this kid up here? Are you saying that? Yeah, he's saying, what? Get out of here, kid. I'm a junior senior. I just barely made it in. So when I think about retirement, I think about, I've thought for years that I've just resigned myself, I'll just die on the job, but thankfully I run a funeral home, so that's fine. That's not a problem. But to keep moving things along, I'd like to introduce Ross Mayot. Saying that correctly?
Right.
Yes. The senior management team of CARP. You joined back in 2008 as Vice President, Community Development. In the capacity that Ross works with CARP, he's responsible for developing and enhancing CARP's network of chapters across Canada. Now, 25 years we know CARP's been around, but this is a national organization of Canadians. In the past, Ross has been involved in educational media for more than 25 years. Working in both public and private sector, TVO, we've heard of TVO before. Ross has worked with TVO, CHUM Television, Access Media Group. The past 11 years, Ross has also worked with Moses Neimer, a name we may recognize, to produce Idea City. If you've ever seen any coverage of Idea City, it's a fascinating, exciting gathering of artists and architects and cosmologists and thinkers and technologists and innovators that are all moving towards this exciting time in their lives. And let's have a big Chatham-Kent welcome to Mr. Ross Mayot.
Thank you very much. And it again has been acknowledged. It really is a delight to be here in Chatham. When David and I were driving in, David is a remarkable historian and trivia buff. He says, so what do we have to know about Chatham? What do we have to know about Chatham? I said, well, first of all, you have to know it's Chatham-Kent now. Chatham. And I had done a tiny little bit of background research, find out some of the economy issues that the community here is involved in, was impressed by some of the things, the transformation. But I was also, I must say, highly impressed, as will David, to find out what an illustrious group of Canadians have called Chatham-Kent their hometown. Here's a few of them, David. Robertson Davies, June Callwood, Fergie Jenkins, Dave Nickel, Sylvia Tyson, who doesn't know Ian and Sylvia, and Michelle Wright, amongst others, country singer. I guess one of her well-known songs was "You Can Crank My Tractor." But I also had no idea the role that this community has had. I'm sorry?
Lester Pearson.
And Lester Pearson, of course. How did he not make my headset? Mike, but lots of communities claim Mike Pearson, including Sault Ste. Marie. And Toronto. But here's something I had no idea, and it's, I say it because we do have chapters from St. John's to Victoria. Canada's a big country. I had no idea the role that Chatham-Kent has played in the history of the Underground Railroad. A remarkable legacy in terms of human rights. When David was talking,
George Brown came from Bothwell. Everybody knows who George Brown is.
When David was talking about aging and health and all of that, it reminded me of the line from George Burns, who turned 100 and said, "If I had known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself." But I was told by my dear friend Bruce Draper, who I want to acknowledge is helping to get things off the ground here in Chatham-Kent. He said, well, one of the things you've got to know about the people in this area in Chatham-Kent is they all have a fabulous sense of humor. They all follow George Bernard Shaw's line that you don't stop laughing when you get old. You get old when you stop laughing. So here's a couple of things that I've noticed as we age. Just little observations in life. The one who snores falls asleep first. The gifts you buy your spouse are never considered as wonderful as the gifts your neighbor buys his spouse or her spouse. This is one rings true a little bit. If you help a relative in need, that relative will remember you the next time they are in need again. Yeah. Just some observations as we... So as David has eloquently shared with you, and there is lots more in his book, it's no longer news that we're living in a demographically shifting society. More of us living longer. And as David says, that's the good news. But there are some issues that confront that change of balance, that flipping of the pyramid, if you will, that we all have to be very mindful of. And I just want to quote, because David makes a good point, that it's not just a numbers game. It's not just there's more of us and it's, you know, there's financial implications and that kind of thing. But one of the things as I read the book for the first time, Beyond Age Rage, David points out in the book that it's more than a numbers game. And here's a quote. The reinvention of aging and the emergence of the new old is no longer just an interesting social and cultural phenomenon. It's setting into motion a whole chain reaction of challenges to the way our society operates. The resources it commands, how it allocates them, what it expects at different points along the human lifespan. And I'd like to say that's what CARP wants to play a role in. Because we do need to understand and manage the implications of an aging society on the healthcare system, on financing a longer lifespan, work and careers, family, and importantly to CARP, intergenerational dynamics. Because as David says again, CARP doesn't want to be the organization known as the group that circles the wagons once you reach a certain age and only thinks of ourselves. Because in our view, an aging population is a societal issue. And it doesn't become an issue once you reach a certain age or get gray hair or start thinking, oh my God, I don't have my job anymore. It's a societal issue. And that's why 3 years ago, some of you who are long-standing members of CARP will know that we used to have an eligibility age of 50. You had to be 50 to qualify to be a member of CARP. And yet we were an organization that fought against ageism in society. Yet here we are putting up a bar at the door that says until you reach a magic number of age, you can't be a member. We thought that was silly and hypocritical. So we eliminated that notion that you had to reach a certain age in order to join the cause, to be involved. And I'm proud to say that we have members, some in this room who are quite young, but we have a 23-year-old member who's a caregiver for her grandmother. And that's why she wanted to be involved. She thought it was important for her to know the issues and to say, I'm in, because I want to make sure my grandmother has a voice out there. And that was an important part of why we lowered the age. We didn't lower the age, we eliminated the age limit. It doesn't mean we've changed the focus at all. The focus is still on the issues facing an aging society. But we've said if we can get more people involved in sharing that mission and sharing that voice, we're all going to be a lot better off. We're still at the very front edge of the curve in terms of the portrayal of being old. I think it was Andy Rooney, the irreverent commentator on 60 Minutes for years, who said, you know, it's an interesting thing. Everybody wants to live a long time, but nobody wants to be old. And the stereotypes about aging and old age are very deep-seated in our society and in our culture. We generally here, and everybody in this room, I suspect, would agree, we've grown up in a youth-obsessed culture. David talks a little bit about it, where it really was about being young and the demands and the power of being young. Well, we've got to challenge some of those stereotypes about who you are as you age. And what we're not trying to deny aging. This is not a denial project, but it's really trying to say that yes, as we age, we are still, David calls it, we're still in the game. Because much of the media coverage, read it all the time, see it on various TV and radio newscasts, you hear these stereotypes portrayed in words like gray wave, silver tsunami. Well, we know what tsunamis do to society. They're not nice things. Do we want to be seen as that destructive force in our society that's going to gobble up the healthcare system, it's going to deplete pension plans, and generally we're going to be a burden to society? I don't think so. But here's something I came across fairly recently in a newspaper article that I think captures this promotion of a stereotype. Of all the threats to human society, including war, disease, and natural disaster, one outranks all others. It is the aging of the human population. No invading army, volcanic eruption, or unyet dreamt of plague rivals aging in its breadth and depth on the impact on society. Now, I had no idea we were so dangerous. These are apocalyptic references to people aging. And I think it's time, and CARP argues that it's time, and I hope you all agree, that we get away from the idea that longevity is a social curse. But that's one of the challenges we have to make, and frankly, that's one of the main reasons CARP exists. CARP is first and foremost an advocacy association. It says we've got to have a voice out there that raises issues, identifies issues, challenges issues, so that there is not this divide in our society. And it's very true. We have to get away from the idea, again, as David notes, that if older people want to stay in the game and stay involved and stay engaged, it's at the expense of younger people. That kind of divisiveness. And frankly, we challenged Prime Minister Harper when he decided to increase the eligibility of OAS to 67, on the basis that it wasn't sustainable unless it was sustainable on the backs of young people. We challenged that, and we'll continue to challenge that. But that kind of divisiveness of one cohort of society against another is not only divisive, it's a lose, lose, lose all the way around, and we don't buy into that, and we don't accept that. CARP takes the view that every human being, regardless of age, is entitled to their dignity, entitled to their rights, not only in the Canadian Charter, but their rights as citizens in society. Last year when we did a survey of members, I'm pleased to say 70% of those members who responded said they joined CARP to support the cause, to support the advocacy, to support the mission of CARP. Yes, it's great, and if we enjoy some benefits by way of discounts or other kinds of services, that's fabulous. But I'm in it because it's important in terms of the work that has to be done. And I'm very pleased that the vast majority of our members are in it for that reason. It's not quite the same in AARP in the United States. Some of you would know AARP. David will tell me, but I think it's something like only less than half of the AARP members are in it for the cause. They're in it because they can get a better health care plan before they turn 65. And that's the big driver, one of their benefits. And they've got some wonderful benefits. We don't take away from that at all. We want good benefits for our members as well. But first of all, it's get involved because of the cause. So there's a few things, there's more than we have time to go through, but we're very pleased, very, very fortunate, I should say, as an organization, to have some tremendous talent involved in our organization. Some of you heard the reference to Moses Neimer. Moses, a well-known thinker, media personality who spent a long time in his career promoting television and youthful television, much music and city TV and all that stuff. He's turned his considerable mind and talent now to what he considers the most important cause at this stage of his life, and that is making changes that support an aging population. So it's really been tremendous to have that kind of committed person behind us as the president. So we're also very fortunate to have an exceptional vice president of advocacy in Susan Eng. Susan is a fearless advocate, challenges politicians, whether it's Queen's Park, whether it's Ottawa, right through the country, to deal with the issues, not just to give an aging group and CARP a pat on the back and say, good work, keep it up, and then walk away. We hold them to account now. We want to know what they think on issues, what they commit to on issues, and we let them know that we're going to watch them through their term in office, because we're going to hold their feet to the fire on these things. And as an indication of, I think it's fair to say, the growing influence and power that CARP has started to find traction in throughout the country. Earlier in the spring, the Bible on Parliament Hill, called the Newsweek Times, identified Susan Eng as one of the top 100 lobbyists in Canada. Because they know that CARP's representation is strong, it's intelligent, and it wants results. It's not there just to be patted on the back. So there are a couple of things I would mention in terms of the advocacy, because as I say, that's the essential point. What are we trying to achieve? And what are we asking people to get involved in to achieve? So, and I don't want to suggest that CARP takes all the credit for these accomplishments, but we're certainly a leading voice in that, and a forceful voice. So some of you know that the economy over the last several years has been somewhat shaky. People are concerned about their pension plans, about their savings. Will they have enough money to see them through? What happened to their portfolio? And CARP has been there arguing that, in fact, Canadians do not save enough for retirement. And many of you would know the data, it's not hard to find. Over 2/3 of Canadians do not have a workplace pension plan. And so CARP has said, listen, we can't let that happen, or else we will fall to become a burden on young people. We've got to find ways to revisit pension plans, public and private, and find ways to say, we've got to encourage ways for younger people to start saving for retirement earlier. And in an easier way. So the notion of a supplementary pension plan has been something that CARP has been arguing for some time, continues to be an argument. But that's for kind of a future generation, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road. Today, there are a lot of seniors who are right on that, what would only be called the poverty line. There's over 600,000 Canadians, many of them single women, who rely on the guaranteed income supplement and their OAS. That's their total income. And if you're in that state, you know that that's a state that is not very happy to be in financially. And so we went after the government and said, you've got to address these issues. We can't let the people who helped build this nation and paid into building the nation all these years all of a sudden come out the other end impoverished. And while it's not a great deal, the government did listen and introduced, and many of you will know this, or increased the GIS by a small sum, $300 a year, but for us it was a symbolic victory in terms of getting the government to pay attention to that. And it's not enough, and we'll keep at them to make sure that that line doesn't keep sinking lower, it has to grow. And I think CARP played a big role in making that happen. Another thing is caregiving. Everybody knows that if we're going to stay, you know, the costs of healthcare in Canada and in Ontario, the provincial government, every program dollar it spends, 42 cents of that goes to healthcare. And that's growing at about 5% a year. It's just not sustainable. So we have to find ways to not cut back on the quality of care, but different care delivery. And a lot of that people are starting to think of, and David writes about this as well. Maybe it's this notion of a continuum of care, where if you can stay at home and not be institutionalized, but have a caregiver come and visit, or have a family caregiver recognized for the role they play, wouldn't that help keep people in their homes? And so we argue that caregivers, even as there's a child care tax, or tax credit, there should be a caregiver's tax credit. And I'm pleased to say that this past year the government has introduced a tax credit, again, of $300 if you have an income, if you're a family caregiver. There's limits to what that is. You have to be in the same household, but it's a start. And these are the kinds of things in terms of health and in terms of financial security that CARP spends a great deal of its time trying to get changed. There are a number of other issues. Elder care is one, and elder abuse is a nasty thing in our society. CARP has gone to bat, and last year at our annual general meeting, the federal minister responsible for seniors promised that there would be legislation introduced to create stiffer penalties for people who are convicted of taking advantage of older persons based on their vulnerability. In other words, convicted of elder abuse. And true to form, the government this year has introduced a bill to stiffen those sentences, that if you're charged and convicted, then your penalty is going to be a lot more than a slap on the wrist, and we think that's very, very important. To not only the awareness of elder abuse, but the sense of if you're involved in that, you better cut it out, because if you're caught and convicted, you're going to be punished in a way that's not going to be friendly. So the notion of these kinds of issues that CARP has been an advocate for, very important, and I hope they relate to some of the things that you think are important to deal with in our society. There are a lot of other issues, but I want to talk very briefly about the role of our chapters. I want to congratulate Carolyn and Susan and Steve and the others involved who've helped put this chapter together, because we have about 650 household members in Chatham-Kent. That translates into about 1,000 individual members. And I can see this becoming, because of the nature of the demographics in this area, some of you know from the recent census that chapter skews, Chatham-Kent skews a little bit older than the national average. The national average age is about 39.9 years. Chatham-Kent is 43.9, so about 4 years older on average. So it's a community that is facing these issues, and I can see a very strong role for this chapter to get involved in, amongst other things, keeping the national office apprised of what's important in your community. But the chapters play a lot of roles. Yes, they get behind the issues that are important in their community, and they work with the national office in terms of saying, let's say in Alberta, pharmacare is a serious and controversial provincial issue. The government wants to up the co-pay payments on drugs in the formulary. There's a shift of burden on that, and our chapters in Calgary and Edmonton and Fort McMurray got together and submitted a very strong brief to the Provincial Minister of Health and Finance in Alberta. In Atlantic Canada, again, the issues were slightly different. The issues around the cost of electricity, the cost of heating, electricity, affordable housing, and public transportation. Those are big issues throughout the Maritime provinces. and the chapters get together and meet with their local politicians, with the MLA, with the federal MP, with the mayor, and say, these are issues that are important to us, and we want you to do something about it, and we're going to fight you if you don't. And to put a little credence into that, not only do they submit a paper, but when there's provincial elections or municipal elections or federal elections, the chapters organize local all-candidates debates. And they make sure that the questions are raised. So, member of this party or that party or the other party, what's your party's position on this issue, and what's your personal position, and will you, whatever the issue is? Because we're taking notes, and we're going to hold you accountable if you do get into office. So that sense of accountability and being watchful of what they're saying, rather than just what politicians would like to say is, if elected, I promise. And then the promise goes away. So they're involved in those kinds of things. They're involved in some of the things that David mentioned in terms of continuing education. A couple of our chapters in the north of Toronto get together. They were interested in what's the new social media. So approach the local high school where the kids know social media, whether it's YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or whatever, like there's no tomorrow. And the kids taught our members in the computer labs in the high schools how to set up a YouTube account or a Facebook account rather. And this was a fantastic intergenerational opportunity to turn the tables, where for a chance, amongst the first chance, these kids got the chance to be the teachers, and our members got to be the students. And it was not only in terms of the content valuable to them, but in the relationship, the sense of, yeah, these kids have their pants down low, but they're pretty smart, good kids. And in turn, the kids said, they taught me a lot too. They asked good questions. So it worked both ways. And again, I've got to tell you, the intergenerational approach is one that's key for us. Our chapters do get involved with other organizations. An aging society, nobody has, it's just not CARP's sandbox or anybody else's sandbox. Maybe one day it was. But we have to cooperate with others. There's lots of groups out there, facilities like this. There's Osteoporosis Society, there's the Alzheimer's Society, there's the Canadian Diabetic Society. There are all these groups who are dealing with the issues of an aging population. And we say, let's hold hands, let's work together wherever we can, let's get involved, because if we can make a bigger footprint on these issues, we're going to get action a lot faster than if we try to do it and compete with one another. It's not about competing. It's about how can we cooperate and collaborate to serve the same client, whether they're called a CARP member, a member of the Canadian Diabetic Association, or an osteoporosis sufferer. So this idea of encouraging our chapters, and they do get involved with other groups and say, how can we help you? How can we create a mutually advantageous relationship is of high importance in terms of the sense that what CARP is not trying to do is either overlap what somebody else is already doing or push that group out or have a competition with that group. As I say, if we can cooperate, it's usually around the same people. I could ask anybody in this room, so are you involved in a Provost Club? I mean, a lot of people are going to know what that is. Are you involved in Rotary? Are you involved in other community service group? Do you volunteer for the local hospital or Meals on Wheels or whatever? There's going to be within, if I keep asking questions, everybody in the room is going to have a role to play. And so CARP is there to say we salute all of that kind of activity. We salute what everybody's doing, because volunteerism is a key way for these changes to be made. And contributions where everybody says, listen, we can't wait for government. We don't need government to do everything. There's a lot of things we can do on our own and get involved that way. Final thing, And then I hope there is some time for questions and, for both David and I. The final thing is the notion of having some fun. You know, I joked at the beginning about everybody having a good sense of humor. It's essential, as you know, for people to say, not only am I doing something that I'm proud of doing and it's good,